Today I'm here with Sarah Townsend, and I like to call Sarah the Queen of Freelancers because what Sarah doesn't know about freelancing is not worth knowing. She's even written a lovely book about it. If you're watching us on YouTube, ta-da, snap! It's a fabulous book. It's called Survival Skills for Freelancers. And for anybody that's thinking about entering into the world of freelancing, it's going to be like your best friend that's going to hold your hand. It's written in a really lovely, friendly, very approachable manner. And it's just really practical and wonderful. So if anybody's thinking about it, read the book and listen to this interview, obviously, because Sarah hopefully is going to share some of her lovely wisdom. Thanks so much for being here.
Absolute pleasure. I'm looking forward to talking to you.
Well, you just told me that this is your 80th interview.
It's at least 80, yeah. And yeah, I have done a lot. And only since Survival Skills for Freelancers came out, actually. I'd never done a podcast before then. So it's been quite a whirlwind of a time.
Yeah. I mean, I guess podcasts are still a relatively new thing, aren't they? I mean, I
Mm,
didn't know what a podcast was probably 6 years ago.
it's true.
So, yeah. But 80 podcasts is quite a lot. Do you feel like you could do it standing on your head with your eyes closed now?
Well, to me, it's just a chat. So
Yes.
I tend to say to people, please don't send me the questions in advance, because if I'm obsessing over, oh, in answer to that question, I wanted to say XYZ, then I will completely freeze up with everything else. Whereas if we just have a chat and you're asking me about things I know about, then yeah, it's all good.
I think it's going to be stuff you know about. Let's
Oh,
see if,
let's hope so.
let's see if I can catch you out. No, it's going to be definitely stuff that you know about. Well, today is the perfect opportunity to interview you because you shared on LinkedIn just a few hours ago that you're celebrating a very, very special anniversary today. Do you want to share with us?
Yeah, 25 years of freelancing. It's my silver jubilee. A quarter of a
OMG.
century of self-employment.
That and you only look 30, so you started when you were 5.
I'll take it.
How does that actually, I mean, does it feel as monumentous as it sounds?
Yeah, it does. It's a weird one because it has really made me stop and take stock, I think. And it's actually, I just came off a coaching call and I said it's actually really kicked up some uncomfortable stuff as well. So it's a funny one. I don't know why I had like shed loads of resistance around posting on social media about it. I didn't really know what to say. I said to you that I'm well, just just between us and all your listeners, because I'm single at the moment. I don't have somebody to go out and drink champagne with and celebrate with, and that feels like a bit of a saddo kind of story. And I'm so happy with my life on my own, but there are certain things that are definitely nicer to do with another person. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a weird time, but it's a real positive as well, because yeah, I've been doing what I do for a really long time and I am really good at it.
What's the main thing? Like if you stop and if you've just had your coaching session, this is probably the perfect time to ask you this. But when you stop and reflect on the last 25 years, what are the sort of big things that come up for you?
Um, Do you know one thing is it one thing actually relates to survival skills for freelancers, and I didn't recognize it at the time, but I can totally recognize it with the value of hindsight, that I think I was kind of therapizing myself, if that's actually a word, by going through these things, because I wrote Survival Skills for Freelancers when it was my 20th year of business. I think a lot of the imposter syndrome around the 25th year has come down to that, because for the 20th year, I wrote this blog post and it became really popular. And people liked it because it was very heart on your sleeve. I'm a very direct spoken person. It is very reassuring, very human, very easy to read. And the writing of the blog post, because it became so popular, that's what led to me publishing Survival Skills for Freelancers. And it just made me look back on the 20 years before and how far I'd come. And I'd never really stopped to acknowledge what I'd achieved. I'm not very good at doing that. I'm very much, right, okay, let's go on to the next thing. And now I can look back and think, gosh, I have been so open about the challenges that I've faced, because these are challenges that most freelancers face. And it's not just new. Yeah, you rightly said, if somebody's thinking of going freelance or has just become freelance, then that's probably the sweet spot for the book's audience. But I've had people who've been freelance for 20 years write a review of it, say 5 stars. I thought there was nothing I could possibly be told about freelance life, but this book has saved me so much time and effort and given me such a boost in confidence. So it's the things that I learned that I have improved on, and really just how long it took me to get there, because there was none of the support when I first started. It was 1999. There
Yeah.
was no, there was barely any internet. There was certainly no social media. I mean, apart from Friends Reunited, if you count that, which I very
Gosh,
definitely don't.
that's taking me back.
Oh gosh. But all these things that used to be, fax machines and repro houses and Quark Express and all these things that were
Fax
part of my
machines.
freelance life. Yeah. It's bizarre.
Mm,
So all these things that have kind of they're from a different era now, and saying I set up my business in the 90s, it's crazy.
yeah,
90s was 30 years ago. It's
yeah,
mad.
it is
So
crazy.
yeah, yeah, it is mad. So it's just kind of how far I've come, how much easier freelance life is for me now, and really how good I've become at creating boundaries around my own time and my own mental health. Because I've since had a diagnosis for ADHD, which I realized again how much I was kind of processing the way my brain works and the things that make my life easier. And that's why I think it's related so hard with so many people. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that long ago where I didn't feel I could justify taking time out of my day for exercise every day, for example. And I now know how much more productive and focused and creative I am when I take time for exercise. So I listen to my body and I listen to my mind now, and really have created a week and a way of working that is compatible with the way my brain is wired.
Yeah, how awesome. I think that that's the one advantage I think of being self-employed is that you can design your work life around how you work. And I think a lot of people who come from sort of a more corporate career where they've been used to doing 9 to 5, I'm just going to sit in front of my laptop and I might get up and have a cup of coffee or whatever, but essentially I'm going to sit in front of this thing or, in and out of meetings or whatever. And I think that's one of the big adjustments, isn't it? That when you're coming out of a job where you're told you need to be in a certain place at a certain time, to go, oh, hang on, I can design my time around how I work. So if I want to work at 3 o'clock in the morning, I can. Or if I know that I'm best off starting my day with a swim, then I'm totally going to do that. But I think definitely took me a little while to just work out, when am I most productive? When am I
Mm.
going to, like I have a nap most afternoons, which seems counterproductive, but I'm so much more productive after the nap. So it's like it's sharpening the saw. I don't know if you're familiar with Stephen Covey, but he talks about, you've got to sharpen that saw and then you're going to be so much more productive. And it sounds like you've totally cracked that now. But I imagine when you first started, perhaps you hadn't, and it took a
Yeah,
while.
I did come from I came from, so I have worked corporate side for a large financial services company, and then I went agency side. I ended up working for the agency that I was using as my supplier in the financial services job. And even though that was an agency and it was busy and buzzy and creative and funky, it was still 9 to 5, office hours, lunch break at 1 p.m., usually going out schmoozing clients, because that was the 90s and that was what
Yeah.
life was like, right?
Yeah.
Don't do that anymore. But yeah, I mean, it can take a while to get that self-knowledge, like what does actually work for you. And a lot of people find on the negative side that they flounder without that structure. And needing the ability to create your own structure and being able to be flexible
Mm.
is a real benefit, but it can take time. I mean, when I started my business 25 years ago, I was working part-time. My justification for going freelance in the first place was that I became pregnant with my daughter, also quite clearly now 25.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
I yeah, I didn't know anybody who was freelance. I didn't know anything about freelancing. People didn't talk about it. As I said, there was no communities, or there was no LinkedIn, there was nothing to sort of support. There were no books out there at the time that related to me as a woman in my late 20s who was trying to set up a business and do it my way at the same time as trying to become a parent. So two things I knew absolutely nothing about, and they both landed on me at the same time in my life. So I was very flexible. I had to be flexible because I had to work around the hours that my daughter was in nursery, and my business grew and evolved as my children grew.
What gave you the confidence to just set up on your own?
I was married at the time, and my husband had a good steady job. He was working as an accountant for Whitbread, and we decided financially we could afford it. I was also encouraged by my managing editor at the magazine publisher where I was working, and I was doing an account manager and magazine editor job there. And she said, "Well, why don't you go freelance?" She said, we'll give you work to kind of tide you over." Because at the time, my managing director, it was just a different era then, wasn't it? It was way before companies had to accommodate flexible working. And my managing director was very much a dinosaur and said, "Your clients simply would not understand the fact that you only work 3 days a week. So it's a flat no to you coming back part-time."
Gosh.
And it just seemed to be a good solution. I didn't know enough about it to know whether I was capable of doing it. I just knew I was extremely good at what I did. So at the time, it was copy editing and proofreading. And yeah, I just, with the confidence of somebody that doesn't know any better, I just took the leap, and I was really lucky. I found freelance work really quickly, with a few cold, well, outreach letters. It would have been letterheaded paper. My first business card I designed myself with Comic Sans. I
Brilliant.
found a little piece of artwork about it the other day, and I thought, oh, I should really share that on my social because it's quite funny.
Definitely.
But
Definitely. This
so
is
my
how it all
business,
started.
I've had a website since oh, total tangent, sorry, but I've had a website since 2002. So my business was 3 years old when I got my first website, and my corporate pink was a decision from the word go, and it's stayed all this
Yeah.
time. I
Still
kind of
pink. The book's pink. Bright
neon
pink. Yeah.
neon pink. Yeah, the book's pink. The book's a
Yeah.
different pink, but yeah, and the other book's yellow. This one, which matches my
Yeah.
wall
There you
beautifully.
go. Which way is it, the wall that matches the book or the book that matches
No,
the
I was
wall?
saying something about that the other day. I can't remember which came first. I think I painted the wall and then thought, oh, I really like this color. It's really energizing. I think I'll go with it for my kind of, yeah, go with it for my book
Your
cover.
yellow phase. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a happy color. You can't go wrong with yellow, can
lovely
you? You
color.
know.
This room is glorious. My office is glorious. On a sunny day, it's the warmest room in the house. The yellow just radiates, and it's joyful. It's
Yeah.
really lovely.
How lovely. I'm going to come and work from your space.
Be my guest. I'm actually
You,
usually working in the lounge bar at my gym. That's what I do every single morning.
oh, right.
That's my second office.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's talk about that because one of the things you do talk about in your book is where you work from. And again, it's a big adjustment. And I heard you say on somebody else's podcast that I think when you're used to being in an environment with other people, when you're employed, and people telling you what to do, where to be, and so on, and then suddenly it's just you normally at home, and it can be extremely isolating.
Mm.
And so it would be interesting to hear from you. Like, what was your process? I mean, I guess you started at home and now you're working from a lounge for half the day, or, for some of the
100%.
day. Tell us
Yeah.
how you progressed from that.
Yeah, I'm very much an advocate of doing what works for you, again, in the same way as discovering your productive times and designing your day and your week around your productive times in the ways that you work best. The same goes for your environment. So it's not especially productive or helpful having to be stuck at home with a little desk in your bedroom and not having options. I think having the choice of where you work is an empowering thing in itself. Some people become freelance because they're highly introverted, they're very self-reliant, but even so, going solo doesn't mean going it alone. And I think it's important to feel that you've got those kind of communities around you, and whether you find those communities online or through real life networking groups or real life co-working spaces or whatever it is that works for you, that's something to experiment with. But yeah, for sure, when I first started, I was living just around the corner from where I am now, still in Gloucester, and I had a 3-story house, and my office was the whole of the top floor. And I just used to sometimes remember, I don't know what's put this into my head. I used to do handstands against the roof was like this because it was the top of the house. And when I wanted to um shake up my energy, I would literally stand on my hands upside down and find that got my brain fired up again. That was before I was a member at the gym. And I think just as the internet has developed and online things like Google Docs and Drive and that sort of thing have made working from wherever, as long as you have Wi-Fi, you can work
Yeah.
from wherever.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I really like, and I have realized that it's probably partly an ADHD thing, because I don't know if you've heard of body doubling, but
No.
actually the physical presence of having another person there. So it's a good idea if you find it hard to stay accountable and you keep getting distracted and you can't focus. It's a good idea to have another person there. But if they can't be physically there, have them there on a Zoom call. Say, okay, so start the call running. Say, okay, in the next hour, I'm going to achieve this one simple task. I need to achieve this in the next hour. And just the process of having that other person there, they can see if you're getting up and down and going downstairs and loading the dishwasher or folding the washing. And it just helps to keep you accountable and it helps to keep you focused. And I find that because I'm in this environment, noise cancelling AirPods essential in my case. That's the way that I get into my kind of flow state, where I'm doing my absolute best work and I'm completely focused and I've got my music in my ears, firing me up, and I'm surrounded by people, but they're not distracting me.
Yeah.
It's noisy, it's busy, it's buzzy, it's full of kids quite often, but none of it distracts me, because when I can get into a state of focus, that's brilliant, because just the fact of being in an environment with lots of other people stops me getting up and down and when I'm not at home, it's great because it means I can't get distracted by all the things, because I live alone, and all the things that need to be done in the house, they're a constant distraction when I'm here. So I've got this lovely office and I do use it every day, but I only use it when I'm doing calls.
Yeah.
So the rest of the time I'm at the gym, working at
Yeah.
the gym.
It reminds me, I heard somebody saying apparently there are student sort of study groups like that now, that they'll meet on Teams or Zoom or whatever, hundreds of them, and they'll all study at the same time. Nobody's talking to each other, but
It's
exactly. Did you say that was called body
body
doubling?
doubling.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I guess that's a form
that's
of
what it's
that, where
yeah.
you just almost feel a bit of an accountability as well to other people, even though nobody's really checking up on you. So really
Yeah,
fascinating, isn't it?
yeah,
And
psychologically really interesting.
yeah. And again, I guess, like you said, it's depending on what task you're doing, being in different environments is going to work to your advantage. So
Mm.
I definitely find that as well. When I was writing my book, I had to have Tuesday mornings, 9 till 12, I would sit in my home office and I would switch absolutely everything off because I'm very easily distracted. And that was the way that I got stuff done. And then I could do editing in a cafe when it was buzzy or whatever. That's fine. But
Mm.
the actual writing part, it took me a little while to work out this is how I have to do it. But that's sort of I don't know, it's like a trial and error thing, isn't it, when you're working for yourself, to really just work out what works for you, because just because it works for Sarah or Yesim doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So
Mm.
it is a little bit of just playing around and experimenting, I guess, which should be a
Absolutely.
fun thing.
Giving yourself permission to experiment and just to play with different ways of doing things, I think is really important. And as we've said, when you're used to being employed, even if it's not in a corporate environment, you do have certain rules and you have certain accountability, but people can flounder without that, having somebody there to check up that you're doing, oh, have you done this yet? Having your boss on your shoulder. It might feel like a stressful thing when you're in that office environment, but actually you might find you can't function without it. So not everybody's cut out to be freelance. Not I have an incredibly close friend who studied to be a personal trainer, and she was a great personal trainer, but absolutely terrible at running a business. And she'd be the first person to admit that. And it just didn't work for her. She
I
had to go
hope
back
so, because she's going to be really offended when she hears this otherwise.
to
Yeah, it's true. Not everybody's set up to work for themselves. I mean, I would say a majority of people just prefer to be told where to be
Yes.
and what to do, and have zero or very little element of risk. I think you have to be a certain type of person to be open to that.
Yeah.
Interesting. I love your thoughts on whether you think it's easier now to make the leap from being employed to self-employed, because of COVID and because of people working from home and having to be a lot more self-disciplined in that respect.
Mm.
Do you think that leap is less scary for people now?
Yeah, I think it's much easier for people to make the leap now, largely down to the internet, because there's so much support out there. Certainly, it's easier because there are books like Survival Skills for Freelancers, where you can spend just over £10 and you can get 20 years worth of advice. And also another thing that's worth mentioning about the book is that there are 100 other freelancers sharing their tips and advice throughout the book as well. So it's different voices. So beforehand, when I first went freelance, the only guidance out there was largely American books written by American guys, middle-aged guys, who were sharing their own very particular brand of very salesy kind of, these are the things you need to know. And it just didn't resonate with me as a
Mm.
29-year-old woman or 28-year-old woman or whatever I was then. And I wanted to recognize the mental health aspects. So now there is so much more awareness of that. There's so much more support via social media. There are communities, there are groups. I mean, I created my own. I'm actually going up to Birmingham tomorrow to meet up with some fellow freelancers that I started a WhatsApp group with in lockdown, just
Oh,
because we
cool.
all felt we were going stir crazy and we had
Mm.
nobody to talk to about things.
Mm.
So we started this WhatsApp group and we started having a call once a week on a Monday afternoon. And it went on for 3 years. But just those guys know, we know everything about one another, not just work wise, when we're worried that we've got a bit of a quiet time or we've got a difficult client, or what do we do about this, or what would we charge for this, but everything, mental health challenges, family issues, bereavements, everything. But technology has enabled all of that. So
Mm.
that form of communication, it just simply would not have existed when I first started. So I definitely think for many, many reasons, it is easier. At the same time, technology is also the biggest distraction and time suck that we never had before, we never had to deal with before. So very much a double-edged sword.
Mm. Do you advocate people going into freelancing if they want to give it a go?
Oh yeah, anybody should try it. I think the one thing that catches people out more than anything else is, say, for example, you're excellent at graphic design and you think, okay, I'll become a freelance graphic designer. it's easy to think you're going to spend 7 hours a day, 5 days a week doing graphic design. But the thing that catches people out is just how much of the business end of freelance
Yeah.
life there actually is,
Yeah.
and how many of the elements of running a business you're probably not going to be great at, you're not going to enjoy doing, and you're not going to get paid for. So that can be quite soul destroying. And that's why I advocate outsourcing, but that's usually a little bit further down the line. But if you go freelance thinking, oh, I'm just going to spend all my days doing the thing that I love, delivering my special skill or my secret sauce or whatever you want to call it to the world, that's the dream, isn't it?
Mm.
Doing all that stuff that you love, but it's not always realistic, because you also need somebody to do your marketing, your sales, your accounts, your IT support, your admin, all these peripheral things that can mean that you get to the end of the week and you've but barely done any of the bit that you love. And instead, all you've ended up doing is all this peripheral stuff that you're not very good at. And it can have a really negative impact on your self-esteem.
Yeah,
So resilience is useful. Thick skin
definitely.
is also useful. And as I say in the book, I don't have a thick skin. I never have had. So it is possible to do it without one, but it is definitely helpful if you've got one.
What's been your workaround not having thick skin?
I don't know if I have one. I just think I I don't know. I don't know. I still take criticism massively to heart. I have really bad rejection sensitive dysphoria, which is an ADHD thing, but I think also a life thing. And yeah, I don't personally, I don't think it ever does get easier. I think as I've got older, I think certainly in my 50s, I've felt that I've cared less when people don't like me. So in life in general, if somebody doesn't like me, I don't stress about it and I don't try to make them like me, which I think a younger version of myself might have done. But in a work context, it's very difficult when you're a creative person to separate your identity as an individual from your output. And if somebody criticizes your output, which thankfully, touch wood, they rarely ever do, it's very difficult to separate the two things. It's difficult to not feel less of a person
Mm.
as a result of having your identity so closely tied in with your self-esteem. It can be an
It's
issue.
very difficult. And I think especially when you're running a service-based business, if you're selling a widget and somebody doesn't like the widget that you're selling, you can make peace with that relatively easily. I
Yeah.
think when you're essentially selling yourself, I think that's a lot trickier, and I see a lot of people struggle with that. I definitely struggle with that, but I think as I've got older, I take it much less. It is funny, isn't it, how you tend to care a little bit less the older you get, because you know that you've got amazing reviews on your book, um, and we have this really human thing where you'll get all your 5-star reviews and then somebody will put a 2-star review, and it's
Oh, tell
like,
me about it.
but I've got 1,000 5-star reviews. Why do I worry about the one 2-star review? But it's just a very human thing that we all have. And I have to I got my first 3-star review yesterday, and I was like, what's that all about? And luckily I am quite pragmatic now. I don't like you say, I think my younger self would have been a bit more upset, but the
Yeah.
pragmatic self now goes, well, hang on, there are people that don't like Elizabeth Gilbert, and they don't
Sure.
like Shakespeare, and
Okay,
they don't
right.
like some of the best authors in the world
Yeah.
still get 3 and
Yeah.
2 and sometimes 1-star reviews, because it would be totally weird if everybody loved everything that everybody else did. That would be totally weird.
Slight side note, but slightly connected, is the fact that my favorite, in fact, my only positive really experience of AI is that thing that it does on Amazon, where it condenses all your reviews, then it condenses them all down into one paragraph and says, these are the things, the themes that crop up again and again and again. This is what people say about this book. So if I'm ever having a bit of a down day, I can just go into that and just read, like, people love my books. I have value.
And they totally do. It is just that don't know why we're weird human beings, aren't we? We're just we focus on the wrong things sometimes, but yeah,
Some of us
no.
weirder than others.
Are you pointing at me? Oh gosh. In your LinkedIn bio, I noticed that you've got obviously all the amazing things that you do, you know, the copywriting, the editing, the author, etc. And then you've got obsessive birder.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Oh, okay. So I'm into bird watching, like, hugely. I was in this LinkedIn community, and one of the important things that they shared was that with your LinkedIn headline, you have 220 characters, and you really should make the most of all of them, because it's effectively really high profile free advertising. So to put all the, like, the certain skills around it, and it's something, writing headlines is something I do for a lot of my clients, writing about sections, but to put something quirky and to kind of like pattern interrupt almost at the end and make people go, what is that? Like,
Like I
so
did
it's
today.
worked. It worked.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically nearly every weekend I'll go out. This is probably why I'm single. Nearly every weekend I go out with my big long camera lens, a camera attached, and my little Birder app on my phone, and and my binoculars. I'm always happiest with my binoculars, and go for a walk, and then literally take a note of every species that I see, and it keeps a year list for me. I've seen 157 different species this year, which is surprisingly
Wow.
low.
That
And
sounds really high
yeah,
for
well,
a
it's
non-bird
just
watcher.
fun. It's just like, when you have a really obsessive brain like I do, one thing that I really love doing is kind of challenge. I get really competitive with myself, with other people, but also with myself. So when I'll go out for a birding walk, and 9 times out of 10, it's on my own, probably for good reason. um, I will try to beat my previous best number of species in one day. So for example, it was 54 and now it's 62. So the last
Wow.
time I went to Slimbridge, I saw 62 different species, which in itself is phenomenal.
Yeah, that
62
is
species in
incredible.
one day, one session. That is incredible. So that gives me like such a buzz.
Yeah.
I just love it. I've always been obsessed with birds ever since I was teeny tot.
So if we have any single bird watchers listening to this, get in touch because Sarah would like a buddy to go out with at weekends. Little
Oh, I
shout
didn't
out.
realize this was a matchmaking
Well,
podcast.
you just never know who's listening, do
Why
you?
ever
So,
not?
yes, there you go. Oh, that would make a great story, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't
This
it
is how I
just?
met the love of my life.
Oh, wouldn't it just? Can you
Oh,
imagine?
stranger things have happened.
Stranger things have happened. That's what I was going to say.
Going back to the book, what made you decide to self-publish?
It was never a question for me. I'm way too much of a control freak to let someone else take charge of decisions like what my cover's going to look like and what the title's going to be and what the layout is. I knew exactly what I wanted. The layout is very specific. When I sent the manuscript to the lady who was going to lay it out, she laid it out in such a way that was so bog standard. I mean, it probably would have been fine by anybody else's standards, but I had such a clear picture in my mind of typographically what it was going to look like. I went back to her with, I'm just honestly a nightmare client, because I knew exactly what I wanted. And I went back with 2 sides of A4 of, change this to this to this to this, and like text style to be like 1.5 line spaced with 10-point spacing between paragraphs. Like, and it was so different. That I actually cried when I saw the first layout of it. So I always know exactly what I want. I've worked with layout design, typography. I'm very visual person. Aesthetic is very important to me. So to me, I no, it just no. being published by someone else just wasn't a thing.
And I mean, the reason I'm going to ask you my next question is because I also self-published for very similar reasons, and because I'm extremely impatient. And I thought if I go with a publisher, it's going to not get into anybody's hand for at least another year.
Mm.
And I don't have the patience for that. Um, but I have found there's a certain level of snobbery. So I've been into a couple of smaller bookshops to see if they fancy stocking my book. And the first question that they will invariably ask is, who's your publisher? And the
Mm.
second I say I'm self-published, I can feel that like their whole demeanor changes and they become very standoffish. And
Mm.
maybe I've just been unlucky, and I've literally been into a couple of independent bookstores. So it'd be interesting to hear from you whether you've experienced something similar.
Yeah, I have, very much so. I think that getting stocked in physical bricks and mortar bookstores, everybody is always talking about supporting your local bookstore. And I really wanted to do that badly with getting my books stocked in there. I'm a local author. I had the same response from everybody. And it's just ironic because the number of 5-star reviews, the sales, I can give them the sales figures. I can tell them that Little Book of Confusables was awarded Best Stocking Filler in WI Life magazine, which has a quarter of a
Wow.
million subscribers. It's won 3 awards, including a gold award, and there's still the snobbery around it. But I have to say, I think a lot of the snobbery is for good reason, because I don't know if you're familiar with the Daniel Priestley key person of
Yes.
influence thing.
Yeah.
I listened to that book after I'd self-published Survival Skills for Freelancers, and all it made me think of is, oh, okay, so I've done everything right then, but I didn't do any of it because I'd read that book. And there are too many people out there who will coach any business owner and say, you need to write a book and position yourself as
Yeah.
an expert in your field.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work. There
Yeah.
are too many bad books out there.
Yeah.
I actually do kind of book coaching sessions for people to help them kind of get unstuck with their idea of whether self-publishing is a good idea for them.
Something that I like to ask all my guests is, what's your definition of success, and has it changed very much over the years?
Yeah, it definitely has. Your definition of success doesn't have to be reflected in the number of zeros in your bank balance and the car you drive and the number of expensive holidays you take every year. It can be simply knowing that you're doing great work that is making a hugely positive impact on the people that you work with, that you're fulfilled because you're doing your best work and you're having the opportunity to really make a difference in the world. And if you can fit that around developing your own schedule that we've already talked about. So for me, I gave myself Fridays off when I turned 50. It was the best gift I ever gave to myself. So I have a 3-day weekend every single week. Just absolute game changer. And I now I start work really early so that I can build an hour of exercise into my day every single day without fail. And for so many years, that was, oh, I can't do that, because I've got to be working every hour. But now I know that it makes me more productive and more focused. So it's an essential for me. So coming up with those kind of essential boundaries and that work-life balance, which people will argue, oh, you can't possibly have a work-life balance if you're self-employed. Rubbish. You absolutely can, and you should.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with you. I remember when I started my own business many years ago when I was in my mid-20s. And I remember going to, I think it was some kind of fair or something, and telling somebody that I'd just set up my own business. And then we were talking about holidays. And he said, well, I just hope that you're aware that you're never going on holiday ever again. And obviously he was being facetious and tongue in cheek.
Sure.
But actually him saying that gave me a bit of a fire in my belly to prove that you can still go on holiday. You can build your business around your life, not the other way around.
One of the first things I do at the start of any new year is print off a year planner and mark out where I'm going to take my holidays. Because if you don't mark them out when you're self-employed, then they won't happen. If
Yeah.
you don't plan in advance, then they won't happen. But if you plan in advance, you plan everything around them, you make sure you've got plenty of breaks, because you cannot be your best self, your best freelancer, therefore you cannot do your best work if you're not taking that time to restore, to recharge your batteries, to do the things that feed your soul. You just cannot be your best self. So that for me is a real priority. It took years to get to the stage where that was the case. And yeah, to a certain degree, I'm lucky that I can afford to do that, and that I have enough regular work and regular clients that that support me in that. But a lot of it kind of comes around to being good at communicating when you're taking time off, giving your clients plenty of notice, putting it in your email signature, telling people in advance. Yeah, all those things.
And you also now have the luxury of not having to go on holiday when the kids are off school, because I guess, have you got two children?
Yeah, I've got a
And they're both
25-year-old daughter and a 22-year-old son.
yeah. And I saw that he's following in your footsteps.
Yes.
Are
I'm
you
so
are you a
excited.
proud mum?
Yeah, so much. He's doing English and creative writing, but his big passion is writing about film. And he's already done work experience for Empire magazine, and he wasn't even there that long, and they've actually used some of his stuff on their website, but also in the printed magazine. We were at the airport, we picked up a copy, and he was like, Mum, I've got a byline in Empire. And he was 21 at the time. And it's just like, wow, this is brilliant. And it's pressure and it's a worry knowing that he's starting to become a writer at probably the toughest time in the world ever because of AI. But I
Mm,
still believe that there'll always be a place and a value for real, genuine, creative, personal copy written by humans.
by real people. I
Yeah.
really hope so. But was he very influenced by what you do?
Yeah, he was. And he really helped me on Little Book of Confusables. He taught himself InDesign so he could do the layout of the book
Oh,
over the
brilliant.
last summer before he started at university. So I had my graphic designer set up the template. George did the layout of all the inner pages, helped me with some of the descriptions, helped me get unstuck when I was kind of like, oh, how do I get around this one? So proud of both my kids.
Well, you've done something right, obviously.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah, I think you should give
Single
yourself a
mum
pat
stuff.
on the back. Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing. I think that we could probably talk all day. I really think that everything that you've shared today is really going to help people who are listening, who are in jobs that they're not loving so much and they want to make a leap. And I talk about the toe dipper in my book. So you're a leaper.
Yeah.
But a toe dipper is somebody who is in employment and is looking at alternatives. So if somebody is thinking about, freelance might be the right way for me to go, then read Sarah's book, dip your toe into the area that you're interested in exploring. And who knows, then at some point, if it all works in your favor, then you might end up being a leaper. But definitely start with Sarah's book. I highly recommend it. And she's also got some amazing resources, which I will put in the show notes. So if anybody wants to check out any more of Sarah's work, then is there anything else that you want to share of how people can get in touch with you?
If anybody's listening to the podcast and wants to connect, find me on LinkedIn and do drop me a note and saying that you say that you've found me on the podcast, because it's always nice to know where people find me. But really for anything else, like buying the books, working with me as a copywriter, getting your documents transformed with my DocuMagic service, anything like that, you can go to sarahtownzendeditorial.co.uk and everything's there, links to my social, everything you want.
Amazing. And in particular, we're looking to hear from bird watchers who might want to hang out with Sarah at the weekend. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Sure, why not?
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure that there is somebody listening to this right now who's gained massive amounts of inspiration from you. So thank you for taking the time.
Oh, I really hope it's been helpful. Thank you. Lovely to talk to you.
Just before you go, if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. If you know someone who might enjoy this, please do share it with them. And if you feel like you're ready to quit your job but you're not 100% sure, then grab your copy of my book, Ready to Quit Your Job. It's available on Amazon worldwide, and it'll help you to decide whether you're ready to quit and what you should do instead.